Welcome back. Thanks everyone to seeing the shorts program, The Ocean. With us is some of our filmmakers in order of appearance. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So starting with Marianne.
So my name is Marianne Farley. I'm the writer-director of Freema, and I'm from Montreal.
And then Grace.
I'm Grace Sloan. I wrote and directed Death Valley. I'm based in Brooklyn, but I'm currently calling from Los Angeles.
And Caroline.
Hi, my name is Caroline Liviakis. I am the director and choreographer of Boys and Girls, and I am based both in the Bay Area and in Los Angeles, but I'm calling from Los Angeles right now.
It's great to have you here. Ariel and Sungbin weren't able to make it, but they have terrific films as well. So let's start with you, Marianne. What was, obviously current events has made this even more pressing than ever. What was your inspiration for actually sharing the film that you did with us today?
Well, I've always been passionate about human rights and more specifically women's rights. So, reading up on abortion rights a couple years ago, I guess, watching a lot of documentaries and just reading up on it, and realizing that there was like a hidden agenda, to overturn Roe versus Wade in the States, but also everything that was going on in Poland and in Ireland. I watched this incredible documentary, Vessel, which is Rebecca Gompert's story. She's a Dutch doctor who really has been helping women have access to abortions everywhere around the world. So I was really inspired by her work and really felt like this was a movie I wanted and needed to make. At first I wanted to make a feature, but then I realized the time was pressing. So I was like, I'm going to write this and I'm going to get financing for it and just like do it as quickly as possible. And the timing is crazy. It's scary right now. What's happening. Yeah.
It's interesting because I always look for what kind of threads or trends are in submissions, because I go through all the short submissions, and the one this year that was unmistakable was procreative rights. And most of the shorts I got, and they were all very good or very horrifying or very moving, were about historical recreations of past injustices and past rules and laws. But you chose to look at the future in a dystopian twist. And it's not a really major shift like The Handmaid's Tale or something. It's just a small little thing that you could see happening and manifesting from just a couple new legislations. What was your specific take on that?
Well, I thought about doing some, like setting the story in the 1960s or 1970s. As you said, a lot of films have already been made about, what happened in the 1960s, or even, in Romania in the 1980s, and, 4 months, 3 weeks and 2 days, which is a fabulous film, a Romanian film. My gut feeling was that if we watch something that's set in the past, then that makes us feel comfortable about where we're at today. And that, where you go, oh my God, that was horrific back then. Thank God we're not there, anymore. But my fear is that, we may go down that road again. What's happening in the United States right now is really scary. If Roe versus Wade gets overturned, that's 24 states where women will not have access to abortion at all, like in 2 seconds, So, and the United States is, it's a huge country. It has a lot of influence for like other developing countries. That's going to have a devastating effect on the world and on women's rights. So, I wanted to sound the alarm in a way. That's why I wanted to put it in the future and have like that dystopian sort of point of view.
Incredibly powerful. Grace, tell us a little bit about what the inspiration was for Death Valley.
Sure. So I work, my day job is as a set dresser and production designer. And then for my art practice, I make experimental films. And so I was feeling very torn in these two directions. So I really wanted to make a film that combined both of these, experimental techniques with, I wanted to build a set. I just wanted to build a spaceship. I saw this plexiglass at this place, Canal Plastics in New York. And I was like, this plexiglass is for a spaceship. Absolutely. And I wanted to work with actors because I miss actors a lot. They're really fun. One of them was actually just calling me during this Q&A. But for the story, I grew up with a lot of outer space around me. My parents met at an outer space enthusiasts conference. I've just been dragged to these things my entire life, and I've had no interest in space whatsoever. I do not want to go to space. I want nothing to do with it. But knowing what we're doing to this planet and just the idea that we might have to all go to space, whether we like it or not, I just wanted to play with this idea of just like nostalgia for this Earth that we're in the process of losing. Yeah.
I love the film because it seemed like an homage to 70s sci-fi, not only in terms of the really spare production values, but also the fact that it takes on some really heavy lifting thematically as a result. What was your association in terms of trying to come up with a resolution that was a little bit more eclectic and maybe completely opaque, but still really interesting?
Wow, that's a lot. Eclectic and opaque. I don't know. I don't like easy endings. I like endings that kind of like dissipate into something else. Trying to think of what was the first part of your question. I'm sorry.
Well, it is an homage to the 70s, but it kind of springboards into something much more existential almost. Seriously. Because of her final fate.
Totally. And I think that's what, sci-fi has always done. I'm such a fan of Star Trek original series. I will say that, like real Star Trek fans know that Next Gen is the better Star Trek, but I love original series, and they've always dealt with heavy existential topics. Like that's always been kind of the job of sci-fi to do. And I wanted something that felt like a throwback, but also felt very modern at the same time.
Well, that's why we had both a dystopian and a futuristic film side by side. Moving to Caroline, yours is sort of works in a vacuum, but there's still some incredible dynamics involved in Boys and Girls. What was your inspiration for the film and for the choreography?
I start my pieces off, both film and live, from a variety of sources. So sometimes I'll think in my head a title of a film, or I'll think of just a combination of fun words, and immediately I see characters in my head, or I'll see a beautiful dress or some amazing costume, and I'm like, I see the character there. With this, it was a piece of music, and I heard this piece of music, and at the end of the piece, there's this staccato, really pop, 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 hitting beat, and immediately I see this image of these two dancers, this boy and this girl, and they're in this kind of this sunlit room, and they're in this happy space, and they have these kind of old fashioned, she's in this red dress and he's in these suspenders, and they're doing this kind of jitterbug-esque sort of foot choreography, and we're focusing in on their feet. And it has this very kind of throwback fun feel to it. So that was the original idea for the piece. I just wanted to go based off of that and build these characters. So I take the music that I like and I bring it to my brother, who's my composer. And I told him, I said, I want a piece of music that has this structure to it of this one song that I really liked. And I said, but I want you to make it your own, do your own, create your own piece. So he goes away for a few weeks. He composes this amazing piece of music that's inspired by this original piece. And he brings it back to me, and I listen to it. And it was just, it's amazing, and it's what you hear in the film, but it just was so different than what I had originally envisioned. It was this dark, it was this hard-hitting, moody, sexy kind of song, versus the other one was just kind of this pitter-patter fun. So I have this kind of conflicting idea of, okay, well, what am I going to do with these characters? Because before it's this happy, old-fashioned, throwback kind of thing. But now I have this dark, moody-esque. And so I started thinking about, where do these characters go with this? And I started to immediately see that I can bring that same idea of this boy and this girl, and they're head to head, and they're doing this tight foot choreography. But rather than it being this fun kind of, we're celebrating, it's a battle. And it's this battle, this seductive battle for power. And they're playing this game of cat and mouse. And they're trying to show each other through this choreography that they're the one on top. And so I thought it'd be kind of interesting where we're playing on this throwback where aesthetically it has a very, I liken it to Tom Ford kind of aesthetic, and it has this very chic kind of elevated, kind of throwing it back to somewhat 60s, 70s glamour in some way, but it's taking it, this classic story of boy meets girl, and it's putting it in this kind of new, very, very ferocious context.
Ferocious is a great title. I mean, it's also incredibly intense because it's you're not quite sure if it's a seduction or if there are bigger stakes at play. But either way, you just can't get your eyes off of them. It's a riveting connection that they have between them. How long did it take to rehearse something like that?
We rehearsed for it was 20 rehearsals over the course of a month. So it was we spent a good amount of time. The rehearsal process for my pieces is always kind of a little bit of a lengthier one than a lot of other dance films because my choreography pulls from so many different styles. And so when casting a dancer, it's always tricky because you can't usually get a dancer that's going to be completely in their wheelhouse and everything and all the different inspirations. And so for this piece, I knew that foundationally I wanted to have a ballroom dancer because of the riffs that we're playing off of choreographically we're taking a traditional ballroom stance. And so they have to have that elevated posture and they're carrying themselves as if they're dancing together, but there's zero contact. And there's a lot of modern and jazz and martial arts influences. So to be able to get Paul Barris, who is my co-dancer, who's a very, very, very trained ballroom dancer, and to get him to also to be able to come across as being a jazz dancer and a modern dancer at the same time, it takes a little bit more rehearsal, but we were able to get it, I think, pretty solid for it.
Wow, great. To everyone, sometimes shoots very rarely go as planned. There are always hiccups, there are always unexpected surprises or left turns. What was something unexpected, whether it was unexpected in terms of a happy accident or a last minute barrier that you had to overcome? What was one example of that when shooting this film? Marianne, what was something that blindsided you maybe when you were in middle of production?
Well, I have to say this film was quite a challenge. When it came to like production design and stuff, the film, it takes place in a meat truck, right? So we found a meat truck, but then it had like a big, huge logo that didn't fit our film. So we had to like just cover the whole truck, but it was like minus 35 degrees Celsius, which would be, I don't know how much in Fahrenheit, it would be really, really cold. So first day of shooting, we're doing like drone shots and we pick up the truck. My artistic director had just covered the truck with the new logo and stuff. And as we drive off, it starts peeling off because it was so cold. And I was like, this is day one. And I have like 4 days. I need this truck to just survive 4 days. So it was hell. So we brought the truck back and we just put like tape on it. I don't know exactly what we did. It was insane. I was freaking out. I was like, oh my God, this is like the worst thing that could happen. But in the end, you always find solutions and you make it work because you don't really have a choice. So. Yeah.
Grace, what about you? What were some unexpected hurdles or happy accidents?
Well, I just wanted to say, Marianne, the truck looked great. So no worries. Everything was worth it. I thought the logo looked great. So
thank you.
Yeah. You know what? I work on set for a living all the time. And this was the first, directing, where I had a crew anyway. So I was nervous as hell that something was going to go wrong because I've seen so many things go wrong on set. And so I was terrified, and then everything went really smoothly. And then I felt terrible for just being this little tense little creature this whole time. But yeah, it went smooth. I was nervous because I took on too much of the art department myself, just thinking like, didn't want to burden people that were doing favors for me. So I let them build the set while we were in the desert. So I, just let go and hoped for the best. And they killed it. We had 6 art PAs that had no experience with power tools whatsoever. And they learned a lot and got it done. So yeah, I think the scariest thing that happened was that it went smoothly.
Caroline, what about you?
This was in general, well, it was a challenge, but it was a very successful, happy one for this film. My choreography is extremely fast and very athletic, and I'm never going to slow my choreography down or dumb it down just for equipment purposes. We have to get everybody else in crew to match the speed of what we're doing, which means when you have extremely intense and fast choreography of the dancers, and then I'm extremely specific with down to the absolute counts, and you're exactly here at this moment, you hold for 2 counts, and then you move here for these long camera shots. Our Steadicam operators and handheld, it has to be super exact. And getting that level of exactness right here, right on this time is very difficult, very challenging. And in the past, it's sometimes operators are more willing to play ball with you on that than others. But thankfully I had our Steadicam operator, Drew Weaver, was a genuine blessing, picks up counts super quickly and able to just immediately get the shot that we need. But where it's this feeling of the camera dancing with the dancers and having them work in synchronicity and not feeling like where it's an intuitive feeling. You want the camera to feel like it's not just showing up somewhere just because it's on the 2 count. It arrives on the 2 count, but it has to get there in a natural flowing way. And so I think that was a huge success, but it was on this film and we got pretty much all the shots exactly time-wise the way that they needed to be. But definitely it's not one of those, any shoot with me is not one of those shoots that you just go on there and you just do it, 2 times or whatever. Everything takes a massive amount of takes to get it exactly right and to get both the dancers and camera to really be working together. Yeah, so that would definitely be the challenge.
Let's talk about editing. Marianne, your film is very suspenseful. So there's some really interesting symbolic juxtapositions with the hanging meat and bodies that have been commodified in some cruel way. But talk a little bit about building that suspense, because that really made the film stand out in a way, not only for its urgency, but also just the fact that it's a real live situation that the protagonist is dealing with. What was your process in terms of editing?
Well, first of all, we shot the film right before the pandemic started. So the editing started in just the beginning of the pandemic. So it was really difficult. At first, I would go to my editor's place and then we would work together, but then we started working remotely, which I really hate because just like timing wise, it lags and it's really difficult to get like that perfect timing. I think trial and error is for me is you try stuff. And then I always have I have different cuts and then I ask people to come over and watch it and then give me, the worst feedback they can give me, which is really difficult for me, but it always makes the film better. So I've always done it that way. It's, editing is really, I think it's one of the phases I love and I also despise the most because it's really uncomfortable for me. But it's important for me to get, like, as I said, the right timing. And especially for a film like this, where you there's a lot of exposition, a lot of information you have to understand that she's at 14 weeks instead of 8, that she lies about that and all that stuff. and the whole pro-life versus anti-abortion thing, it's like just finding that right amount of giving out as much information without it being too like heavy-handed. So yeah, I think getting feedback from people is really key in my creative process anyhow.
Grace, something I really love about the film is the first half takes pretty much what you would expect as a normal sci-fi trajectory, but then midway you start flexing your experimental muscles. It gets more meditative, it gets more hallucinatory, there are a lot of interesting colors that happen, and a lot of that has to do with a really sophisticated editing approach. Talk a little bit about what you did and what you envisioned.
Thanks. Yeah, I it's hard for me to make a narrative film just because I want to make such, stranger things. So I was like, okay, I'm going to make a narrative film, but at one point it's going to be a landscape film, and then it's going to be a flicker film in here. Like, I just want to put all those things in a narrative context because I feel like people are so focused on stories that I think they forget it's a visual medium. And so I'm just trying to inject that as much as I can. And so the hallucinogenic parts are optically printed, which is just a technique I learned in San Francisco at SFSU and just fell in love with, especially the way color reversal sinks into color reversal. Is just like double exposing those. There's no match for it, I think, on Premiere or any other editing program or anything you can shoot on digital. So yeah, I just think films are dreams. So make them dreamy.
Perfect. Caroline, when it comes to editing a dance piece, I think there's such a bad habit in contemporary dance pieces where you segment everything to the point where you don't know what's happening. It becomes too confusing. There aren't a lot of shots of the full body. And for some reason, even though you have an enormous energy in the film, you always know exactly who's doing what, when, and where in conjunction with each other, which really takes some skill. Talk a little bit about what you were looking for with the editing, because you talked about all the coverage you needed to have with the camera.
Okay, thank you. I'm so glad that you picked up on that. That is something that I'm definitely working against. Is there's in music videos, but in the way that dance is shot, it's music videos or anything like that. We have the chorus of dancers and they're doing everything in unison. And they're doing all of this movement in all these different locations, and you're just cutting between them, doing the same movement in different locations. And then you're doing all these ridiculous effects where we're just cutting on every single movement. So when I see it at the end, it's like, I can't even tell what the choreography is anymore. And I think that first of all is just a habit of directors and choreographers not being the same person. And when you have directors directing something that's movement based and they don't know what the choreography is, so they don't have a loyalty toward the choreography. They're just thinking in terms of glossy, glitzy visuals. But I think that it's extremely important if you're going to have something that's dance based. It's extremely important, if not it's optimal, if not necessary, to have the person who's directing it, if ideally be the choreographer or at least somebody who has a loyalty toward the movement. When I choreograph something, that is my script. The script of my films is my choreography, and the dancers are the stars. And I'm not going to jumble it up just so that it looks more glossy, because that means I'm not doing my job in my choreography. That means my script is not good enough to last on its own. And I want the camera movement to emphasize the movement, not to become an entity in and of itself. I should see that the camera is interesting, but it's working with the movement as it is designed. And they're both creating this picture together, versus when I see that what's kind of really existing out there, I see that the camera is existing almost in opposition to the movement. The movement wants to go somewhere else, but the camera is just there, and we're just going to chop it up however we want it. So the biggest issue that I find with that is definitely aesthetically, is that it's just, I'm not seeing a cohesive piece. I'm not seeing the art as it was intended to be seen. but also narratively, if we're trying to actually have dance communicate a narrative versus just having dance be this visual side piece all the time and where it's just only for glitzy entertainment. If we really want to take dance forward, which I think that there is so much that can be done with dance and film. And if we really want to have it communicate a strong story that is through the movement, it's not only through talking or through singing, the movement communicates what's happening. You have to have the camera support the movement versus just creating this glitzy story, this glitzy kind of choppy edit. And where the editing becomes an accentuation of the choreography. So I'm amping up, if I'm doing really hard hitting movement, sometimes you don't need the editing to do fast cuts because the movement's already hard hitting enough. You can have the editing kind of have its intensity of cuts and then let it flow for a while. Let the camera and the dancers have their moments so the audience can at least sink some of the aesthetic and some of the meaning in.
Marianne, Grace, Caroline, thank you so much. One last question really quickly, starting with Marianne. What's next?
I am finishing up my first feature, and which is called North of Albany, and prepping another one, which I can't talk about yet. But yeah, so busy, which is why I can't make it to the festival this year. But next time, definitely.
Right. Grace?
I'm prepping a short documentary about my parents. That's happening while I'm here in Los Angeles, trying to write a feature, and then I'm just going back to work, which I'm really excited to just go back on set and make movies.
Cool. And Caroline?
I am finishing up writing my first feature film, Lessons in Love, and that we're going to be shooting that starting next year.
Great. Well, thank you all three. Please stick around after we sign off. But thank you so much to our audience, our patrons. Thank you for supporting short programs. Thank you for supporting the California Film Institute. We hope you check out all our shorts programs. They're all really, really terrific. Enjoy the festival and have a great day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching.